Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Rabta Forum International Digital TV. I'm Bisma Mirza, and today I will be discussing with you an article I came across. It is titled as Nuclear Panacea, a Global and Pakistani Perspective. This article is written by Lieutenant General Khalid Kidwai. Panacea, first of all, is a solution to all the problems. And in General Kidwai's opinion, nuclear is that panacea. This article can be divided into three parts, as the title already says, a global and Pakistani perspective. In the first part of the article, Jill Kidwai discusses the global scenario, global perspective, how the events are unfolding, and how the major players, three major superpowers, are responding towards it. In the second part, he talks about the impact of this global scenario, global situation on South Asia, especially he talks about it from the Pakistani perspective. In the third part, he discusses the ups and downs of nuclear energy and the challenges it faces and how he considers it to be a nuclear panacea. Kidwai writes in his article that he says that we are living in interesting times. We're living through interesting times, and not just interesting, we're also living through historic times. Why does he say that? He says that because we are witnessing how history unfolds before our eyes in our lifetime as we watch three superpowers, the United States, Russia, and China, competing, containing, and where possible, confronting each other to establish their respective footprints for global supremacy. He says this chessboard is very interesting. Now he analyzes one by one all the three superpowers. He says the United States of America has been an undisputed superpower since the World War II, particularly since the demise of USSR. But he says that, however, the USA has faced challenges to its world domination in the past and continues to face serious challenges to its status today. He says the second superpower of our times or his time, the USSR, collapsed in the early 1990s and passed on the mantle to the successor state, Russia. And he says Russia for 2 decades as well struggled, not only just has struggled to regain its superpower status politically, economically, militarily, and technologically. And he says both Russia and USA have demonstrated vulnerabilities, especially in the context of in the Afghanistan debacle, and that had serious geopolitical clout and global influence. He also says that even today, both Russia and United States, Russia directly and United States indirectly, are entangled in Ukraine conflict. And he also says this is also another power struggle or show of, a struggle for global power, global domination, while the world, he says, awaits the conclusion of the conflict because its eventual outcome will, in fact, will redefine the future global strategic equation in more than one way. Now he discusses that he says that for the specific perspective of examining nuclear panacea in a global perspective, he says, excuse me, two issues are relevant and they are very close to taking center stage in the Ukraine conflict. He says one is of energy as a strategic tool of war, and the second, the possible use of nuclear weapons, especially tactical nuclear weapons. He says also, if we make this inference that of these issues, one could perhaps debate the hypothetical possibilities of what might have been if Ukraine had not given up its nuclear arsenal. He says in this, he further writes that in the global geopolitical milieu of today's global order or disorder, it's the third superpower of our era, China, which is emerging. In fact, he says it has emerged as the brand new superpower, posing multiple challenges to the United States in the political, economic, military, and technological spheres, and now making soft inroads even in areas of traditional US influence. He further writes in the article that both Russia and China are aligning against US supremacy, and they are reiterating their position as recently as in September 2022 at the meeting of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And while he says the US find itself confronted by strong challenger. Now he identifies the possible responses of United States. He says the identifiable responses in the United States, geopolitical and economic strategies to retain its preeminent dominant position by the sheer force of its military, industrial power, and alliances stand out in considerable contrast to the strategies of China, seemingly more confident and exercising strategic patience in order to assert its global position of eminence through the tools of its economic power, its soft global reach, and growing military, nuclear, and technological prowess. He further says now, the second part of the article, now after analyzing the global situation, he poses these questions with regards to the impact of the global situation on South Asia context. He writes, where do South Asia and Pakistan figure out in this emerging global future? What are the emerging challenges for Pakistan, especially in the context of its national security interest, measured whether in economic terms, including the contribution of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, or in military terms, including its strategic deterrence capability as a nuclear weapons power? He says that there are two givens of Pakistan's strategic environment. One, that Pakistan enjoys a relatively advantageous position because of its geostrategic location as a potential trade and security corridor. And number two, Pakistan is a responsible nuclear weapons power with the need, desire, and capability to further its objectives in the field of civil nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Now, debating the possibility of a nuclear panacea in a global perspective, Khalid Kidwai writes that it is all very well, and he says, I would like to stick my neck out and say with confidence that for Pakistan, whether in economic terms or in security terms, nuclear panacea is a godsend and has worked well to mitigate many of Pakistan's concern in both these areas. Now, talking from military perspective, General Kidwai writes that Pakistan's nuclear capability has proven beyond doubt to be a security panacea, an asset, as it has satisfactorily addressed Pakistan's long-standing dilemma of conventional forces asymmetry with its adversary in the East. He says, because of a robust nuclear weapons capability articulated to the policy of full spectrum deterrence, Pakistan is secure from possible aggression by its larger neighbor. He writes in his article that he has said this on a number of occasions, and he would like to repeat for emphasis that Pakistan's nuclear capability as the great equalizer has proved to be an instrument of peace enforcement in South Asia. Now, talking from the economic terms, he writes that Pakistan's civil nuclear energy program as a nuclear panacea is in a potentially takeoff stage, provided various governments of the day display the necessary vision, understanding, and support to Pakistan's nuclear energy vision 2050, which stands duly approved by Pakistan's National Command Authority since 2011. He writes that nuclear energy vision 2050 envisages the provision of 42,000 megawatts of clean, safe, and relatively cheap energy to Pakistan's economic growth needs through the sequential installation of a series of nuclear power plants across the country in all 4 provinces. He writes that one of the salient features of nuclear energy vision 2050 is that very early on, after the installation of the first few pairs of nuclear power plants, For example, Chashma 1 and 2, 3 and 4, Canap 2 and 3, the program starts to earn for itself and over time becomes self-financing so as not to place any financial burden whatsoever on limited government resources. He writes, Pakistan's 7 nuclear power plants, including 4 at Chashma, 3 at Karachi, are a pioneering segment of nuclear energy vision 2050 and have gone a long way in improving the capabilities of safe, clean, and efficient operations. Khalid Kidwai writes that the global politics of embargoes and restrictions inhibited Pakistan's venture into this area for many years to Canap 1 only until China became Pakistan's reliable partner in the development of nuclear power. He writes that a 325 megawatt pressurized water reactor, Chashma 1, was set up at Chashma in collaboration with China. Chashma 2, Chashma 3, Chashma 4, Canap 2, and Canap 3 followed, making it a total of 3,600 megawatt. He quotes the fact that K2 and K3 are modern generation 3 plants, and he writes that there's strong economic logic for Pakistan to stay the course and continue to build more nuclear power plants as per the Nuclear Energy Vision 2050. After this, he discusses the ups and downs of nuclear energy, and he states that there is a saying which is, it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. And he says this is very true for nuclear power, which has seen many ups and downs for the 70 odd years that it has been around. He states only a few decades ago, when people worried that fossil fuels would last only for 100 and 150 years, the nuclear energy option presented itself as the new, practically limitless, safe, environment-friendly, and economic base load option, a nuclear panacea. He says there was a nuclear rush before one knew a few hundred nuclear power plants were operating in the developed countries, while Pakistan and India also ventured into nuclear game. He writes that there was opposition to nuclear energy by some civil society groups, mostly in the developed countries, that were really going big on nuclear energy, but the nuclear experts professed a very strong, it is quite safe belief, and paid only rudimentary attention to the opposition. He says that things are going great until the incident of 1979 3 Miles Island accident in the United States, which came as a major blow to the nuclear energy, and it took out the wind of its potential growth. For example, he says that after the 3 Mile Island accident, there was no nuclear power plant which was ordered in USA. And there was no nuclear power plant ordered in USA for almost 30 years, despite the fact that there were no casualties and there were no significant radiation leak outside the plant. He says that over here, media comes to play its role, and the Hollywood movies, The China Syndrome, however, cashed in and did great business, while Jack Lemmon and Jane Fonda scares the wits out of the audience. Then he says another incident which took place in 1979, that is the Chernobyl accident of 1986, was again a bad advertisement for the nuclear energy industry, and even more consequences, as the radiations did indeed spread outside the plant, creating considerable worldwide panic, particularly in Europe and UK. Both these accidents are engraved, he says, in our collective memories as a negative, iconic moments in the nuclear energy history. He writes that during both of these accidents, he was present, and he was present once in the United States, another time in UK. And he says that at a personal level, I witnessed the unfolding real life dramas of both the accidents up front. He states in 1979, at the time of the 3 Miles accident, I was doing a military training course in the United States. And my wife and I remained glued to the television as the minute by minute details of the accident appeared dramatically on the televisions. On the television in 1986, he says at that time of the Chernobyl accident, we happened to be visiting the UK. Here again, the ball by ball coverage on the television of the radiation clouds and the possibility of the fallout moving towards the UK was swallowed by intense apprehension. He then writes that the accidents gave those who oppose nuclear energy a plausible narrative which they could use to make their point about the spread and long-term effect of radioactivity released in a nuclear accident. He points out to us a UN report which was issued in 2011, which stated that there were 28 immediate deaths and a maximum of 15 deaths from thyroid cancer could be attributed to the accident, but that did not gain much publicity. Now he says that the burning issue of climate change and the threat of rise in global temperature came to the rescue of nuclear energy. He states that the nuclear industry had started to make some recovery when Fukushima accident happened in 2011. He says this time an external event, a tsunami, swept away the pumps of the emergency core cooling system, causing a core meltdown in 3 reactors. He says there was an economic burden, but no deaths resulting from the accident. However, public apprehensions about nuclear safety grew and nuclear renaissance as a panacea became a casualty. Now he explains that nuclear energy might have survived all of that in the wake of climate change threat had it not been for the fact that while the capital cost of nuclear energy kept climbing, the solar cells, which are also environment friendly, began getting cheaper by the day. He writes that the foregoing, however, is not the complete story. Nuclear energy also has some additional psychological strings attached to it. People in general cannot disassociate civil nuclear energy from the radiation fallout of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He writes that it is because of the fear of radiation that nuclear security is as important an issue as nuclear safety. He writes, the equal attention must therefore be paid to nuclear security because there is this threat of radioactive releases in case of a terrorist activity from within or outside a nuclear power plant. In the contrast, in this context, he says it is now internationally well recognized that Pakistan has taken stringent measures to put in place a professionally strong state-of-the-art nuclear security regime. General Kidwai further writes that the foregoing public apprehensions about nuclear energy have no doubt contributed to bringing down the share of nuclear energy, particularly in those developed countries where it all started. He said that the global share of nuclear energy in electricity production, which had fast mounted to 17%, came down to 10%. He says there are currently not many startups that are planned that could turn things around. And he talks about the current war in Ukraine and the resultant gas crisis. Both have combined to create yet another opportunity for nuclear energy. European countries are showing a tendency to return to nuclear energy so as to avoid the scary brownouts winter without heating. But however, he says the nuclear power plants have long construction times and the turnaround cannot be swift. He says how far this potential nuclear renaissance will go and translate into a possible nuclear panacea will depend upon how the professionals and experts in the nuclear industry, as well as politicians and public interest leaders, will handle the situation. The nuclear industry, writes, nevertheless, must take proactive and effective measures to get its rightful place in the global energy scenario. In the end, General Kidwai shares his opinion and he writes that Pakistan is not only ready technically for proceeding the path of energy through the nuclear route, but it is also a dire economic need for Pakistan's sustained growth, especially in a charged political environment wherein energy from hidden resources, the cheapest, has become an issue of divisive and uninformed debate among the provinces. This is General Khalid Kidwai's article, Nuclear Panacea, a Global and Pakistani Perspective. What do you think? Whether nuclear is the panacea he's talking about? What is your views? Please do share it in the comment section below. And thank you very much for watching RFI Digital TV. I'm Bisma. Take care. Allah Hafiz.